Our speaker today is Abby Kenigsberg, and she will be talking on media ethics. Abby is a graduate of Wellesley College. She studied theater directing at Yale School of Drama and received her MA from UCLA. She has been a film reviewer and news anchor at Cablevision and WGSM Radio in Huntington. She was the founding executive director of the Long Island Coalition for Fair Broadcasting for 21 years. During that tour of duty, Abby's watchdog group pressed for the establishment of Long Island news bureaus from New York-based television stations. For the past 10 years, Abby has been an adjunct professor of media arts at C.W. Post College of Long Island University, where she teaches media literacy and media ethics. Abby?
Thank you so much. I'm very glad to be here. I want to say special hello to some old friends. First of all, Muriel Neufeld, who it's her inspiration that brought me here, so I thank her. And Arthur and Lynn Dobrin and I go back many, many years of fighting the good fight, and we won't stop. And of course, I'm very happy to say hi to David Spritson, who is known at the Post campus of Long Island University as Mr. Ethics, Mr. Thoughtful, and Mr. Philosopher, and one of the best teachers that's been there ever. So welcome to all of you. I'm so happy to see you. I'm speaking today specifically about the new technology. Muriel was nice enough to ask a couple of you some questions so that I would get a sense of what was going on in your minds and what was of concern to you in terms of media. And I concluded that one of the things that's most concerned to all of us is that we have a little bad news. The bad news is that the wonderful pastime of getting the New York Times, having a second cup of coffee, smelling the newsprint, and going over it page by page, finding out what was important, what was a nugget we hadn't thought about, what was the wonderful delight of taking time. You could take a lifetime, as a matter of fact, but taking some time to feel a partnership with that somewhat smelly piece of paper and the wonderful ideas and pieces of information that we got from it. Well, it's gone, folks. You might still do it, and that's fine, but the world is passing you by. That whole exercise of the cup of coffee and the newspaper and the extra time has changed. Technology has brought us to a very another place. And many of us believe that the technology is worrisome and has brought with it a number of ways of doing things that are threatening, worrisome, and very sad. I might remind you that when the waltz first started, there are a number of people who thought we were into bad times. And when ragtime started, many people thought things were going downhill fast. When silent movies started, many people thought it's not going to be like it was in the old days. And when the printing press began, way before any of us were here, people felt very threatened because the old way of doing things, the oral way of doing things, was going to be forgotten. I don't need to tell you, I can say by a couple of smiles on your faces, the problems never happened. Those institutions or the new way of doing things were not a threat. And in fact, it was different. It may have threatened us who liked the old ways, but certain things remained, and I want to call your attention to the fact that certain things, I believe, will always remain. Bill Moyers called journalism the nervous system of democracy. And he called journalism a sacred contract between journalists and those who put their trust in them to explain how the world really works. Moyers uses a terrific quote from Martha Gellhorn, who was a colleague of his, and she said, "Serious, careful, honest journalism is essential not because it's a guiding light, but because it's a form of honorable behavior involving the reporter and the reader." This is never going to go away. That's my opinion. The truth is enticing. The truth and getting the real story was enticing to Socrates. It was enticing to Pulitzer. It was enticing to Ed Murrow, to Fred Friendly, to Bill Moyers, and Seymour Hersh, and I could go on naming. The new technology has already changed habits, changed rhythms, increased motives. There's more profit motive now than ever before, but it hasn't changed human nature. And I have some examples that I want to share with you today, the results of change that are heartening to those who are disturbed, because there are many signs out there that the new way of doing things will be extraordinarily different and extraordinarily wonderful. And the new technology will bring us into a different world where more truth can come forward for more people than ever before. The first thing I want to read a little bit of a column that the public editor of the New York Times, who is Arthur Brisbane, wrote just last month on the 13th of March. Well, that's still this month. He says, early adapters of the Times boldly went there 4 years ago. I made the move only the last few weeks to Twitter. That is, that curiously named domain where Middle Eastern revolutions erupt, and Charles Sheen too. I haven't been tweeting long enough to judge its merits, but I note that some Times Twitters and editors have become prolific at it, sending out thousands of tweets to thousands, and in some cases hundreds of thousands of followers. For them, the online service, which allows you to transmit 140-character messages and links, has emerged as a vast medium of international exchanges. Is this a good thing, I wondered, or an epic waste of time? After all, if you aren't one of Twitter's 200 million account holders worldwide, you don't see any of this material. It certainly isn't going to do you any good. Twitter devotees at the Times tell me the benefits are real. Twitter enables them to be better reporters, for one thing. By selecting a universe of Twitters to follow, they can track news sources of all kinds, including rival journalists. They can create listening posts across every topic they need to monitor. David Carr, incidentally, David Carr is a columnist, a media columnist in the New York Times, whom I think is extraordinary, brilliant, and on target, and wonderful to follow. That's David Carr, media columnist for the Times, who is, as of Friday, had notched 12,000 tweets and 304,000 followers, said Twitter frequently puts him ahead of the news curve, and he said, "Twitter is my default news feed," unquote. Patrick LaForge, editor of News Presentations, 15,000 tweets, 11,000 followers, goes a step further. Other Twitter users curate the web for him, he said, in an email message, which means they find, analyze, and comment on useful links that interest me far more quickly than I could ever do for myself. If they link to something that grabs my attention, I will generally look at it or save it up for later. I don't read everything. I dip into Twitter when I have time. The analogy is a cocktail party. You can't join every conversation, but you drift through the crowd and stop now and then. Nicholas Kristof, whom I'm sure many of you know, who is an extraordinary, humane, thoughtful, brilliant columnist in the Times. Nicholas Kristof, the op-ed columnist, 4,000 tweets, 1 million followers, tweeted, blogged, and wrote columns inexhaustibly for various hotspots in the Middle East after the revolutions there began. Now, he said, he's planning a possible trip to Mauritania and has used Twitter to inquire his million-man follow-up group in search of expertise on the country, with good results. He has used it also for something that blogs and columns just aren't appropriate for, as he said, publishing a hunch. and this is Christoph. On Twitter in Libya, I tweeted something to the effect that I think people are a little too optimistic, he said. That proved to be a useful caution. I didn't put it in my column. It didn't fit. I didn't have enough evidence for it. It goes on and on about how people in the Times are using Twitter to get stories they hadn't known, follow through with people whom they don't know, all around the world. There's no time frame with the new media that we're all exposed to now. There's no time, and there's also no walls. It's 24/7, forever. Another example, which I think is very interesting and I found fascinating, it was a panel done by the New School called Long-Form Journalism, and they called it Slow-Cooked Stories for a Fast Food World. And on the panel was David Remnick, the editor of The New Yorker, Ira Glass from NPR's This American Life, ProPublica, which is a not-for-profit investigative team that works with The New York Times, and one of its producers was on the panel, and Frontline, which has some of the best investigative journals on television. Lowell Bergman writes, and there was a producer for Frontline. So you had The New Yorker, NPR, ProPublica, and Frontline on this panel. One of the speakers said, "People say long form is dead. Long form is absolutely not dead. What is dead is bad long form." Another person said, "J-School doesn't matter. Critical thinking and writing are key." Someone else said, "The tablet and the iPad are amazing, a salvation almost for documentary filmmaking going forward." "We're going to have to think much more three-dimensionally than two-dimensionally," said the woman from Frontline. "You're going to expect more when you see a Frontline piece. Not two-dimensional, three-dimensional, so that you and I can talk and converse with whomever is making the information come across to us." The panel also said, in passing, that the New York Times is a great institution. They have a dozen people. They had a dozen people in Libya. I don't know how many there are right now. A number of them just got out not too long ago, after having been in a grave possibility of being killed. But Frontline says the footage of the journalist that was in some of the electronic media that we sometimes see and sometimes don't see has gone viral, and that means that it's been across the globe, and it's been helpful indeed to journalists. I work on the panel for the Polk Awards, which is an award. It's a highly prestigious award given for the very finest in investigative reporting. And the Polk Awards just announced the winners for last year's pieces, and there were reporters from the Washington Post, the New York Times, the National Public Radio, the Star-Ledger in Newark, the Milwaukee Journal, the Los Angeles Times, Bloomberg News, and so forth. So when you work at a panel like that, and you read many, many, many pieces of information, you understand that investigative journalism, the kind of journalism that Bill Moyers thought was crucial to democracy, is not going away. It's there, and we think, well, with all the new technology, we've got so much that we are accosted by so much that we can't attest to the value or the legitimacy of it. We're drowning. That's the feeling that many of us have because we come to the technology as somewhat novice and much too old. I noticed that the two children who read here, they use the technology great. They knew to speak right on the mic, which I failed to do. And there's something in that. If you watch a 5-year-old with a technology, they come to it very second nature. So we're all at a bit of a disadvantage because we're too old for the technology, but we can jump on. When you get people like David Carr from the Times, and you get people like Nicholas Kristof who are using it and enjoying it and celebrating it, then you know it's not lost. So that's what I want to conclude. I'm very happy to get questions from all of you. David, you can even stump me because you're good at it. So I would simply conclude that in the old days, we had a wonderful relationship with print. It's gone. We get much more from the new technology today, from the internet, from blogs, and from people who are at NPR, people from the New Yorker. That's the old way it was, but they use all of the new technology, and they don't believe that we will get lost. They don't believe democracy will fall apart because of the new technology. And all we need to do is have the children help us. If any of you have grandchildren, you'll know that they can give you very fine advice on how to use something you don't know how to use. And it's a very exciting time. Can it be considered threatening? Yes, but I would prefer that you consider it that we're happy to be here and grateful to be at a time for newness and challenge, but the basic problems and commitment facing democracy will stay with us and be safe. So that's my message for today, and I'm looking forward to some questions. Yeah, Dave, we'll start right with David. Yes.
Since you invited me, let me ask you your comment, your thought about this. Because it seems to me that this proliferation of media outlets and information, which is really in some sense astounding, and it allows anyone to find the things that they want to find. It seems what it also has done is, in some sense, seems to create alternative universes, where people end up tending to choose, and that's all of us, right? Tending to choose to watch the programs of the people that we already believe in. It creates a kind of alternative universe. So you have, and I'm particularly obviously concerned about the kind of Fox News Network universe, which also includes talk radio, and you can go on and on about that. And so they end up getting mutual confirmation of an alternative reality. So there seems to me like there's a mixed message there with respect to the availability of material versus the loss, you might say, of a common public space, so that then you have these alternative universes which don't seem to be able to communicate with one another.
A number of people talk about the fact that there's just so much out there, and psychologists say that we tend to go to the message that we believe in anyway, so we don't stretch. And you're saying that in the old days, when there was fewer and it was more central for all of us, there was a greater sense of a group together. And I would say to you, I don't know if it's a total answer, but that medium wasn't perfect either. If you think about the two major wars, Vietnam and Iraq, the major media in this country got a D, maybe an F. Why am I saying a D? It's an F. So we are inclined sometimes, as we look back, to say it was great in the old days. There were real problems. When you had Peter Jennings and Walter Cronkite and Dan Rather, we think then it was really great. They were all around when we had Vietnam. They were all around when we had Iraq. And it wasn't so terrific. That would be my answer. Yeah. Yes. Lynn.
I've read that a lot of young people get their news from the comedy shows. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I'm teaching kids who aren't getting any news. And I've had a kid in a class now who's really bright, who said she was watching the news and it was so disturbing that she just couldn't take it anymore. And then, who's the guy on NBC with the jaw? Jay Leno. She said Jay Leno was on, and in his stand-up, he talked all about the current events, and I got it all from him. And I'm the teacher, and I'm thinking, my God, where do I go here? So I nodded, and I said, what do you think Jay Leno wanted? Why was Jay Leno there? What is he paid to do? What is his job? Is it to tell you what's happening or to make you laugh? So she thought about that for a while. And she said, well, is there to make you laugh? I said, yeah. And he could be giving you information that might be helpful. But don't mistake it. If he says Gaddafi, that doesn't mean it's the story. It means it's the joke. Because I try to teach kids to like television, because they're going to like it anyway. Watch it, because they're going to watch it anyway. But to say, just get it. Why is it on? Why is somebody having you watch that? What's in their mind? Because all commercial television is there to get you to the advertiser. It is not to get you to the program. Well, that takes some doing. And that's for all of us. If you go to commercial television, you are going to get involved in the exercise that is there to get you to the advertiser. That is the function of it. I want the kids to understand that. So where I am with that, that's how I handle it. I say, why is it there? What do they want you to get out of it? What does Leno want? Does he want you to get the news story? Or does he want you to get the joke? Yeah, Muriel.
You talked about all of the good writers who are doing service and writing intelligent, important information. What about all the other people, millions of them, who get on revenge, slander, libel? People commit suicide as a result of some of the things they put on.
There's a lot of
Everybody reads.
Yeah, there's a lot of concern about the kids who don't really understand the power of the internet. I do want to say one thing, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about the UCLA kid who was just on YouTube making fun of Asians. But first, I want to say that don't forget, if anybody's here really up on their history, didn't Thomas Jefferson, didn't he really slander Adams every possible way he could when he was running for re-election? It's really true. I mean, well, yeah, okay. We're in a different climate. But slander and libelous and outrageous behavior is not new. Granted, more of us know about it, but maybe that's good. Now let me go to this kid from UCLA. It was on YouTube. She put it on YouTube herself. She was an undergraduate at UCLA. She was in a low-cut dress, which bothered me. The kids said, oh, come on, she's just in a tank top. I said, she could have worn a blouse. And her hair looked great, and I think she was on YouTube to get picked up by, to get to be famous. Anyway, she was very annoyed because Asian kids were in the library talking on their cell phones. Of course, when it was late in the evening when they were in the library, but it was probably daytime in Korea, and that's one of the reasons why they were talking then. She made fun of the Asians. She mimicked their voices, the way they speak, which is a different tonality than the way we speak in English. And she was extremely critical of the fact that the families come on the weekends and they make the food, they clean the apartment, they take the kid out for a meal, they pick up the dry cleaning, they do all of this. And she was making fun of all this, deriding all of this on YouTube. So I said to the kids who had laptops, has everybody seen this? And they hadn't. I said, well, I want everybody to see it right now. Can you get it? Oh, yeah, they got it, faster than I could get it. There they were. And they said, you shouldn't talk in the library. And, you're making too much of an issue. And I did something that I didn't do so much when I was less senior as a teacher than I am now. I told them, I said, this is my opinion. This is what's wrong with America. To use YouTube to make fun of the way someone else speaks it's just not nice. This is a great experiment in America. This experiment is, can we all, coming from different places, different colors, different looks, different creeds, can we all live together? So when this woman makes fun of people, number one, it's not nice. It's not the way we can live together. Number two, she's criticizing the family for coming in. She was making fun of the fact that they all come together. I said, you want to know Obama? I said, and this isn't a political statement, I say to them, because a Republican would say it too. Obama's very aware that Koreans and Chinese and Indian people, the kids are getting better educated right now than you are right here. Do you know why? They're taking it very seriously. It's very important to them. And the fact that the family is there, then there was a kid, an Asian kid, who responded on YouTube to the lady with a low-cut tank top. He said, yeah, my family comes, my mom, my dad, my grandparents, and my sisters. He said, sometimes even some cousins come. And they do everything. They clean up and they get everything ready for the next week. And I do a 4 average. I said to these kids, Obama knows that these kids with a 4 average and the family behind them, they're beating us, guys. They're beating all of you. They're going to look for jobs in technology. These kids are better trained and their parents are behind them and boosting them. Instead of laughing and criticizing it, think about it. Think about what these kids are getting. That's a terrific thing. Have them all come and say, we're working with you and behind you. We could use more of that in America, and I don't think you should make fun of it. She also said that there were hordes of Asians at UCLA. I said there's 37% of them. You know why? They come to get the strength and the power that they can out of an American institution. And that's terrific. But all of you, I say to my students, instead of laughing at it, look at it. Look at what that kid who's different from you is getting out of this. Look at that. What is that family doing? It may not be also funny just because it's different. That's what America's all about. So that's why I try to open. And I think the fact that it was on YouTube was great, because it gave me the opportunity to say, look at that and rethink it. So I think the openness of the technology and the fact that it's available to so many more of us is, in the long run, wonderful. It gives people like Bill Moyers and Cy Hirsch to say what's important. And David Rebnick. Yes?
What about in the short run? What about all of those people who agree with this racist kid who was on YouTube? That could be millions of people.
We do what we can. I go one student at a time. Hopefully other people will also look at it, and it'll be a cause for conversation. I agree with you. I agree with what I think you're getting at, which is, how can we, a small voice, take on injustice? But the America is, it's a huge experiment. The experiment is, can a bunch of people, all different, who care about justice and openness, can we survive? It is a huge threat or dedication that's immense. It never happened in the world before. There's never been a place. Think of when America started. If you were in England and you had, Elizabeth I was a Protestant and you were a Catholic, you didn't open your mouth. You could be in jail, you could be killed. So the fact that, my students don't know that at all. I say, you could be locked up. Nobody would question it. Nobody would say peep. You could be beheaded for saying the wrong thing or doing the wrong thing. So the experiment here is huge, and it's not easy. But I think you need to have the confidence that people, the forefathers, the founding fathers here did have. It was an extraordinary challenge, and it's written in the document of the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. It's amazing. It's amazing. Yes?
I also happen to teach communications and social media class, and one of the things I find with my students is that they seem to be willing to be spoon-fed a lot of this stuff. The critical thinking skills, when I was in J school, we'd take an article, a news story, and analyze it to death. That skill doesn't seem to be there anymore. They're just absorbing all the information and spitting it back out. Do you find the same thing going on? Especially with things like the Drudge Report or Huffington, they'll take it as gospel.
Yes. I think that's a challenge. I have them reading the New York Times. They have to read the whole article. I tell them that they don't know about the kicker, that usually, if it's a very, very long piece in the New York Times, the writer at the very end will put something in that's a delicious little nugget that the writer has put in at the end to reward the reader from having stayed with a piece. So I told them that. I said, get to the end. There'll be something that might be, but they don't even sometimes get the irony of the end piece. But I have them doing it again and again and again, and I just keep asking them, why was that story in the center of above the fold in the New York Times about Caterpillar and Hilberton, who are some of the major global corporations who did business with Gaddafi, including payoffs? Why was that in there? They don't know. Why was it in there? What did Bill Moyers tell you? What did Bill Moyers say? That there was a sacred contract between the journalist and the reader? Oh, they say. So it's a very long process. I think one of the ways I can help is by giving this opportunity to the students, but the other way I can help is never quitting. And I never feel that it's a bad future. I feel the future is as hopeful and as full of fire as the best of America. And one of my inspirations is my grandmother, who was in Russia, and there were at least 16 children, and the family had enough money for a couple of the boys to come over, who they sent over first and worked in factories, Lower East Side. And finally there was enough money for one girl to come, so they went to the oldest girl and said, you can now leave. We have the money for you to get across Germany to Hamburg and get on a boat, I guess for a month, and then get to the New World. She didn't want to leave her mother, but my grandmother, who was 13, pushed her way forward and said, I'll go, and I'll tell you, Mom, whether you're able to keep kosher. There was a rumor that she couldn't keep a kosher house in America. She said, I'll tell you. I'll make sure to find out. And my inspiration is that woman, that 13-year-old woman who said, I'll go and report back. And I think probably all of you are of the same mind, that there's something so extraordinarily valuable here. And the fact that the kids aren't there yet, well, the kids are someplace else. They're born later. But there's a lot of potential in these kids, and if we continue to pour in as best we can. I also had a kid who came up to me one day and said, my boyfriend and I were watching Fox, and I told him what you said about Fox. And I thought, oh, Lord. I said, what did he say? She said, well, he watched for a while, and then he said, she's right about all the stories trying to frighten us. So it can happen. But I went home that night and I thought, Murdoch, 700 million, Abby, 1. Yes.
This idea of plasticity of the brain, do you think that there are any effects of this new technology that's changing young people? And
In what way?
well, the brain, that the brain changes. It used to be like the brain was stagnant. Now they believe that the brain reacts and actually changes because of people doing things.
Well, I think that there are some tests, some research that I've heard about how the brain will change because of various pieces of information that they get and how they get it and that stuff. But I'm inclined to think if I worry about that, I maybe should have worried about the waltz. I just have to go forward. I do think that to talk to a psychologist and find out what's happening in that regard would be interesting, because I do think that there are problems with it. But we must deal with what we've got right now. And I think that I am so inspired by this country, with all of its defects, with all of it's racist, it's unjust, it's unfair, it's very money-driven, profit-driven, which is, to me, a very grave problem. Advertising, which keeps the industry going, is interested in getting children to think of things that are going to change their lives. Stuff doesn't really change your life.
I appreciate your optimism.
Yeah, I can't help it. I really feel that way. Anybody else? Sure.
What do you think of the Times new business model with paywall?
Well, I think that it's good. I think that we'll have to pay, but when we got the newspaper, we paid. And if you buy the newspaper, you get all that stuff free. Oh, I did want to mention also, if any of you are on nytimes.com, and if you're not, try to get on it. Times Select, every day they show you in the New York Times under video, you can see it's probably an abridged version, no, most likely an abridged version of the editors meeting to go over the major stories that are going to be on the front page. They bring you up to date of what's happening. So you're sitting in on an abridged version of a meeting, and it's fascinating. If you deal with nytimes.com in terms of every story, there's blogs from New York Times people, there's an interface between the public, the computer person, and the New York Times, which is every bit as dimensioned and as fascinating as the Times was in the old days when we saw it over breakfast. So I urge you, if you haven't, to get at nytimes.com, and if you don't want to pay for it, go to a library, which you probably can get it there, because it's a remarkable, it is truly stupendous, the amount of depth that the Times has brought to the internet. Yeah, there was a couple. Can we have more questions? Yes? 5 minutes, yes.
I just want to make a comment that if you are a subscriber to the New York Times, you get that service free. So although you're getting the Times, you can get all those other
Right.
possibilities.
Yeah, which is terrific. But if you're reading the paper, take time to get on nytimes.com and just wallow around. Go to sports, go to technology, go to business, go everywhere you want to go. You will find more than you'll ever be able to read, ever. Yes, there was one more question in the back, yeah.
Yeah, do you know of any efforts that are being made to work on high school students understanding the media and all its sides in terms of knowing how to analyze and discriminate the information they get from television or any of the newspapers? Are there any kind of, concerted efforts to help?
The New York Times is making hundreds of millions of dollars worth of concerted efforts to get kids into the Times early so that they'll have them for life. There are tremendous number of, tremendous. There's a lot of opportunity. If you teach or know somebody in the high school or junior high, even the grade school, to get in touch with the New York Times and find out what they're doing for your age group, it's remarkable. And the Times understands its readers. Most of the readers in the Times is a strong cadre of school teachers. There's a strong cadre of business people when they're not reading the Wall Street Journal. Some of the columnists in the business, Joe Nocera, Andrew Sorkin, and other columnists in the business section are, I don't understand a lot about business, but I understand, having read them a lot, I understand them. But if you're interested in below college, the New York Times makes a very concerted effort daily to get those kids involved and reading from a critical point of view. Thank you so much.